So if men don't participate, what is it, like the only woman who's there has to sponsor 10 people?
Mm-hmm.
And then she'll get kind of almost ridiculed, like, why are you sponsoring all these people? So you have to find that balance.
Welcome back to Breaking the Binary, brought to you by Coded Diversity. We're your hosts, Arden Jarrett
and Sarah Fraser.
We're recording on the traditional lands of the Awabakal and Worimi people. We also acknowledge all First Nations Australians on whose traditional lands you are listening from today. Thanks to our sponsors already on board this year, Nui Tech People, MGA Thermal and Fraztech.
Woohoo! Today we're discussing sponsors and mentors with Annie Lacombe. Annie is the engineering and safety manager at MGA Thermal and has 20 years experience in the manufacturing industry. Annie has a degree in chemical engineering and is originally from Canada, where she worked in an oil refinery before joining an engineering firm. There, she worked on a FIFO contract in New Caledonia and then moved to Australia in 2008. She joined Orica in 2013, Boeing in 2022, and has now been with MGA Thermal since 2023. That's last year. Over her career, she has been involved in initial process development through to startup and commissioning of various processes in petrochemical, industrial minerals, and mining service industries, as well as supervision and management roles. That's a long list of impressive achievements.
And that's 20 years.
20 years worth of achievements. And I got through most of them without saying any of the words wrong. So
congrats. But we're really happy to have you here, Annie.
Thank you.
And MGA Thermal is also very lucky to have you. So
thank you.
Let's get started today by setting the scene and discussing the difference between sponsorship and mentorship. So who wants to go first?
Do you want me to go?
Sure.
I have like a thing really easy to remember.
Yeah.
Mentor speaks. Like a mentor will speak with you and a sponsor will talk about you.
Nice.
So it's quite easy to remember, like when people don't really know the difference, like mentor will help you develop skills. A sponsor know the skills you have and know what you're capable of and will talk about you to others.
In a positive way.
In a positive way, yes.
Not just like, did you see her?
Yeah, no.
I know something you often say, Sarah, is that women tend to be over-mentored and under-sponsored in the workplace.
Yeah, it's a really common phenomenon where everyone's happy to give women in the workplace their 2 cents on what they think that they should do, which I always find a little funny to hear from a lot of men because they don't face a lot of the challenges that we face when we're trying to get into certain roles or achieve certain positions. And whilst having that mentorship is valuable, it's always worth taking with a little grain of salt that what worked for them doesn't automatically translate for someone who presents as a woman. But yeah, definitely we need more people putting their money where their mouth is and actually encouraging and supporting women to take the next step, to make that next jump and giving them the feedback, the positive, chat to other people. That's not how you put that. But you know, it's not just, it's one thing to say to a woman that you're trying to help out, oh, you should go there. But it's another thing to go to that place and say, you should bring her on board.
Yeah, definitely. So, Annie, have you had any successful sponsorships in your career and what was the impact for you?
Definitely one that I always come back to. And it goes with what Sarah was saying. Like I ask him, can you be my mentor? Because you go to those women leadership summit and they tell you need mentors. Like nobody tell you need a sponsor. They like, you need mentors. You need to have at least 3 if you want to have a successful career. 1 is not enough. So I asked him and he was like, nah, you already have all the skills, but you need a sponsor and I'll do that.
Cool.
Amazing. And I was like, oh, what is a sponsor? Because I didn't know at the time. And he explained it to me. And he said, I'll still help you if you need mentorship, but I don't think it's what you need. And we had an agreement. We meet I think it was every fortnight, but he was like, you have to come prepare. If you want me to mentor you, you come prepare. If not, we just postpone it. But in the background, I'll talk and I'll look for roles for you. And he definitely did because that's how I ended up. Like I was stuck at a level. Like everyone knows you're good and you're so good that you get everything and the rubbish job that goes with the good job too, because you're the one who can get stuff done, but you never go up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he put my name forward. I ended up having a senior manager role and it's all because of him.
Amazing.
Like I know if he was not there, I would not, because they directly appointed me. Like they didn't do it's like we do that for others. We can do it for someone as well.
Of course, you had the prerequisite skills, and it
I
was
had
a lot
all
to
the
do with you just
skills,
being naturally talented, as
Yeah.
well as, yes, his sponsorship got you there, but also a lot of that work was yours as well.
It was, but I
Yeah.
don't think I would have got there. I think you get stuck in a level unless someone give you that little nudge to access those roles that are really in demand. There's not much rotation in those roles, and often if people don't talk about you, they don't know you could do that role.
Yeah.
So he did that role for me.
That really leads into our next discussion point, which is why sponsorship is crucial for women's career development in a man-dominated industry. So I think part of that is also men still occupy the majority of senior leadership roles.
They do.
And so if you don't have men pulling you up or, well, women who are in those executive roles, but because they hold most of the leadership roles, it's difficult to find someone who's willing to be a sponsor from that level.
Yes, it is. It is. Like when you look at the statistics, it's still men dominating those areas. So you need someone that will trust you enough in your capacity to talk about you, because even if most of the big companies now, they're saying we're doing like fair processes for all the roles, but the reality is that when you get to a certain level, it's still getting access to the interview, getting access to the role. It's still, people need to think you're capable of doing it, and people need to know you.
Yeah, I think it also kind of addresses that thing where it's a bit of a boys' club. Like getting a lot of jobs has as much to do with who you know as what you know. And that is easier. Say, a lot of the value of private schools is that you grow up with a network of other really rich people and you give each other favors, and that accelerates you through your career. And you find that in a lot of spaces dominated by men, they know each other and they're happy to give each other a handout or like a shout out for a job. And that is a form of sponsorship, although they might not see it that way. So it's pretty common for men to be sponsored for roles. And if men keep sponsoring men and all of the onus is on women to sponsor other women, then we're never really going to shift the percentage of women in those higher roles, because it'll never change. It'll just be a man succeeds a man and a woman succeeds a woman, and that's how it will stay. So it's up to, I always say that gender diversity and improving gender diversity in technology and every other space isn't just women's business, because it really annoys me when people are like, oh, you know, if it's to do with gender equality, like, oh, I'm not an expert on that. I can't do anything in that realm. And it's like, well, you're actually some of the people we really need to come on board and actively start sponsoring women. You might not, I don't know, play golf with them or whatever, but go out and look for those skills and be able to appreciate the talented women you have in your network, and then use similar influences that you might use for someone who is a friend that is a man. And that's as easy as sponsorship can be.
Mm-hmm. There's an unconscious affinity bias that means that people tend to prefer people who are similar to themselves. And that's like appearance and gender and everything like that. And so that...
Talking sports.
Yeah.
Zero interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's definitely, people, sponsors or mentors seem to fit within their same gender. So it's very useful to break away from that.
Yeah, and it's also a little sinuous thing. Like you'll go to a big meeting out of town, and then every time I've been, like the women are tired by 10 o'clock. And we know we have a big meeting the next day, and the guys go drink. And then after that, they have all these connections because they went to drink together.
Yeah.
And then when there's job, they think about these guys because I met them at that meeting, and they'll think about it. And we kind of exclude ourselves without knowing, but we know we need to do the best job the next day. I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah, like in a lot of those spaces, you can't afford to be hungover or tired or off your A game because, as I've said, we need more mediocre women in tech because women are over-criticized. Like you're either the best or the worst. You can't show up tired or off your A game because people are going to put you in the worst bucket when you're really striving for the best bucket. You can't just be tired and that's fine.
Yeah.
And you did a fine job. And you can get away with that. Like, I feel like a lot of men in those spaces might be more able to.
And also your own safety.
Oh,
like who
yeah.
wants to be alone with a bunch of drunk people? Like
Oh,
at
yeah.
night?
Or like, night, like even getting to the venues or getting home from the venues.
Yeah,
I think there's definitely a lot of that it doesn't even cross.
their mind.
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
I actually raised something in a tech group that I'm part of the other day, which was a controversial opinion that if you're not sure about giving someone a compliment on their physical appearance, especially in a work setting, don't. And all of the men were like, no, I love compliments and I love giving compliments and they make me feel so good. And all of the women were like, oh my God, yes, please stop doing this. That would be so great if you didn't. And the men were like, oh, but it's nice. And the women were like, well, we don't know if that's a safe interaction. Like you might be the best person ever. You might be the worst person ever. When you're saying, well, that's a pretty dress, I don't know whether to feel threatened or like, oh, they must really like my style. And I don't need to.
Time for themselves.
Yeah, I don't need to be dealing with those mental gymnastics, especially in a work environment.
Yeah.
It was really fascinating that like feeling threatened by a compliment was not even something that had crossed their minds. To them, it's just a nice thing to hear. To us, it's like, do you feel some kind of ownership over me now? Or am I indebted to you in some way because you've said a nice thing in my direction?
I know this is a bit of a tangent, but I know Annie has some stories about cultural differences in like, working with people in the workplace and what's actually acceptable.
Oh, yeah, the kisses in the morning. Yeah. I worked in like remote, like flying, fly out in New Caledonia, and they tend to kiss everyone in the morning. So like two women will kiss each other like on both cheeks. Men kiss women, but the men shake hands. And like there was not many women. So then you're like, I don't want to kiss more than 100 people in the morning. Like I don't want to. And you really had to approach it because it's cultural. So you don't want to insult them that they think you don't want to. I'm like, there's like, it was a flu too. There was a flu epidemic at the time. And I was like, well, so I had to approach it kind of a bit with the epidemic and also like, oh, well, it's too much. Like it would take me an hour to kiss everyone and I don't want to.
It's not really good use of my time.
No.
COVID was great for the fact that I'm not a hugger. I actively don't like hugs, but I'm also super awkward. So trying to tell people, oh, actually, please don't touch me, is really hard. So sometimes I'll just cop it. But COVID, they were like, oh, we'll just give a knuckles or an elbow. And I was like, oh, I'm living the dream. Because they do sometimes kiss you on the cheek. And I have a tendency to flinch. And then instead of kissing me on the cheek, the person's just kissed me on the neck, which is about 600 times more awkward. So as a result, I usually keep a safe 1 meter distance.
Thought it was 1.5.
Yeah. Every time me and Arden say goodbye to each other, she says, would you like a hug? And I say, no, thank you.
Yeah. Well, that's when I'm hanging out with you and Riley. And Riley would be like, yeah, you can have a hug.
Yeah, he's a hugger. I use him as a sacrificial lamb. Yeah.
So back to sponsors, we've mentioned trust a little bit and how if the sponsor is going to like actively use their personal clout or like credits to like talk up this person, then there needs to be an aspect of building trust.
Yeah.
So how does the sponsor know that they can trust the person that they're sponsoring, and how can this person who's being sponsored help build that trust, that connection?
I think, well, the first thing is that it's pretty awkward to go ask someone to sponsor you. So it has to kind of come naturally. Like it's normally the other way. The sponsor will offer it to you because it's like, or unless you get in a relationship that you think like, you know, your manager really loves your job. So it will have to be your direct manager in that case, like someone you work directly with. Which was not the case for my sponsor. He was higher up in the company than my direct manager. So the people I sponsored in the past, because I had to do it, like as Sarah said, there's not many women. So if you have women working with you, you'll naturally want to sponsor them. It's not true that women works against each other. They actually work together.
Yeah.
I don't like when they say, oh, women together, they like bitching against each other.
I think that's the whole the witch idea. You can't see too many women together. No, they're just
it's not true.
Like, conspiring. Yeah. So we help each other.
Especially in like when you're a minority somewhere, we'll hold each other together. And I find a way, well, you'll have a feeling like that someone is a good worker. And as Sarah said, most women in tech are amazing anyway. So you're like
for now.
For now. Yeah, we need more mediocre ones. But like you'll get the vibe and then observe their work, know what they're capable, give them stretch assignment. And if they're doing it, But while you're doing that, you can still drop the name of that person a lot. So people remember she exists.
Yeah.
Like randomly in a discussion, they always talk about the same people and you say, yeah, but this person, this. Like you just keep in faces everything they do. You have to do it way more than you would do for someone else to be noticed.
Yeah.
But to build the trust, look at their work. Make sure you know what they want to, because that's another thing. Like you can sponsor someone for something they don't want to.
Yeah.
So make sure you know what they want, what they need as support. By sponsoring them, you're giving them a chance to have exposure, but they may still have the need that they're not ready for certain things. Like I know I had someone I was sponsoring and we got an external like the mining industry. They have that big mentoring program. So we got her on the sidelines. So she got some support for other stuff. And then when you know what they want, what they need, and what they're capable of, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
You just talk about them all the time.
When you got your sponsor, and I guess this is an aside, but it's very much about trust. There are some people, and this is not a generalization, not all people, of course, but some people will use these like business or business conversations as a way of interacting inappropriately with others. Like I've had instances where people have asked me out to coffee to talk about a job or something in the business, and it turns out that was never the plan. This was actually a date, and they've just used business as an excuse.
Okay.
And as a result, I tend to be a little, you've got to assume positive intent. It's exhausting to assume everyone means to do the wrong thing. But I did have one mentor where I was like, are you helping me because you're actively invested in my success? Or are you helping me for some other insidious reason? Am I like going crazy even having to ask these questions? It's always a fun one because if you assume they mean well and they don't, you're naive. And if you assume they mean horribly, then you're full of yourself. So it's really hard to get that balance right. What did your sponsor do in order to indicate that his intentions were really good and was really invested in your success in a legitimate way?
It's more what he didn't do, I think. Like it was pretty, when he started in the company, he always helped me, even if it was 2 levels above, because he was like the site manager before he sponsored me and I was a superintendent. And sometimes I had issue and I would go see him because my manager was not available and he was helping me. And he was always checking in, but he was doing it with everyone. So it was not, not just one person targeted. He was checking in with all the 5 superintendents at the time we were. So I could see, and you just get that gut feeling.
Yeah.
I think I go with gut a lot. Like we tend to overanalyze things in science. I just like, if I have a bad vibe about someone, it's probably true.
Yeah. It's valid to go with that vibe. I will say, like, it's the closest thing I have to a sponsor is my direct boss, James. He brought me in as a data analyst, having no idea what I could do, saw a little bit of my work, and is really, whilst I still work at the company, has given me every resource and every faith in me to do my best work, and has really let me elevate myself into these projects and having these conversations. And whilst he might still be on a learning journey of his own about the best ways to show up in tech to increase gender diversity, he's always been super supportive and open to those conversations. But yeah, when in doubt, he's like, Sarah can do it because she's amazing. And I'm like, oh, haha. So, there are good sponsors out there, but it's always fascinating to just, I don't know, learn to, I think I need a more consistent and accurate gut for some things.
But I think he was really genuine. Like we had good discussion about like what's important, like what's important to tell someone. Yeah. In the sense, like in general, and he would like, is it like going to be better for the person if you tell them? Is it like, is it necessary? Is it kind? Is it going to change something? And if it doesn't, you don't need to talk about it.
Yeah.
And he always had that approach for everything. So it was never not kind.
Yeah. So necessary.
Kind. And will there be like an outcome of it?
Yeah.
Like,
okay. Will it change anything?
If it doesn't change anything, why are you like, you know, some people can, as you said, like over criticize people, but it doesn't change anything. Like what's the purpose?
Yeah. I feel like I need to take that on board for what I say to myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's good self-talk
Yeah.
too. It's a good tool. for
Quote my psychologist yesterday, you need to work on your negative self-talk. And I was like,
it doesn't
she's
need any
told me
work.
that. I know. That's one of the criticisms I have of myself.
So it sounds like the sponsor needs to spend time seeing you work and see like what you achieve over time, so that they build the trust that you actually are going somewhere and want to go somewhere, but then also directly talk with you about what your goals are.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then, like in the case of my main sponsor I had, then he was like in a different office.
Yeah.
Different like part of the business, and he still checked in with me and still asked others what I was doing. Like he found ways to know what I was doing to then be able to keep sponsoring me.
Actively invested in your success.
Invested, yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's awesome. This feeds a bit into the is it kind, is it necessary? Does it change anything?
Yeah.
But research has found that the feedback managers give women tends to be kinder and less helpful than the feedback given to men. How can managers ensure that the feedback provided to women is as constructive and helpful as it is for that provided to men?
It's really interesting. When I find like with women, people are worried to offend women. I'm like, why? Like we're able to take it because we get a lot of criticism in our life. Why, when it's time to have constructive feedback, you worried you're going to...
They're worried but in the wrong vertical.
Yeah. It just doesn't make any sense. But I think some of the companies I work, they had a really clear structure how to provide feedback, and they were training manager. Well, if you follow the same structure for everyone, then gender is like not relevant. Maybe some people will still smooth it, but at least if you have a structure for feedback. What I like in some of the company I work, it was you have to have clear example when you're giving a feedback. What was good, what was bad, you have a clear example so the person can relate to that example.
Yeah.
And you exactly say what would have been better in that situation, so then the person knows what the expectations are.
Yeah.
And then it's constructive. And I feel if you follow that structure and remove a bit of your bias that you're worried you're going to insult the woman, like the purpose of feedback is to help people progress. That's why it's called constructive feedback. It's not negative feedback.
Yeah. I think it's also, it's always really good to identify it as feedback. Like I got anonymous feedback that I didn't take feedback well. And I was like, in what situation was this? I have no idea where I didn't take it well. And then I figured, like, was it someone just telling me something? And in my head, I hadn't categorized it as feedback. And so in that way, I didn't adequately sit down and say, okay, yeah, I can reflect on that and take that on board, because I was, carrying on with whatever I was doing, not realizing it was feedback. Yeah, I don't know.
I really lean into the radical candor, which is having difficult conversations from a position of caring about the other person and their success. So if it's a conversation we need to have because it's important that we start working on these things, even if it's hard, we've got to lean into that. If there is like something that can change, if it's something that, I don't know, your elbows twist too far, I don't know, like something they can't help, there's no point having a difficult conversation about that other than to make them feel worse. But if it's something that they can actually action and everyone's just been too scared to talk to them about it and it's holding them back in some way, it's actually a disservice to not have those conversations, as long as you're coming from a position of caring. And I think that's the important part. You're not just there like, I'm going to tell this person what for, like rolling up the sleeves about to hurt some feelings. It has to be I care about you and I want to help us all do better. And this difficult conversation is a vehicle that we can do that with.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the things that manager have, especially in tech, is that tech people, they're not necessarily leaders and they get put in position of management or leadership because they're good at their job. Yeah. But then switching that gear that they actually going to be good because of others, not them anymore. Like a leader is someone that has to adjust to the others, not people adjusting to you. Yeah. You tailor your approach to everyone to develop them. Yeah. Not to develop. And that will develop you at the same time. But it's a gear that need to happen. Doesn't happen to everyone.
You're assessed on, IQ or whatever measurement of intelligence you want to use, but that does nothing to say how much EQ you have, so how much emotional capability, and that really defines your success as a leader in a lot of verticals.
Yes. The 5 aspects of EQ, and one is awareness of others.
Don't be it. Oh, I don't know if that's a swear word, so I'm going to avoid saying it. All right. Shall we on to the next question, which kind of, I guess, plays in. They all play in because they're all on a general theme. God, we've done well staying on topic today. What role does acknowledging one's fear of success play in women's career advancement, and how can sponsors address this? Or is this something that the people with the fear should address themselves?
I feel when you're a minority, like it's not just gender, like different, you'll have fear of success because you always have that feeling that things are harder for you. You've not noticed, you work really hard. So then you put those own barriers on yourself, and sometimes mentorship can help with that, with break the barriers. Coaching, I did some coaching with previous companies, and that was really helpful. I remember one of the lady that was coaching me, I gave her my resume and she's like, "That's shit." I was like, "What do you mean it's shit?" She's like, "Too soft, way too soft. You went in the trap of what women do and focus on all those like what's so-called soft skills," which I don't use that word because I think it's actually EQ, as Sarah said. It's leading people. It's all those skills that are really hard to develop. So it's not a soft skill. I don't like that word. But she said that, you have to, she was really direct. And then it triggered my own fears because I was like, oh, well, like, why? Like, did I go on that tangent? And I think it's that fear of like asking for more, asking for what you think you deserve, because you have that fear at the same time of being rejected. Like it all goes back with that fear of being rejected. So how you can support someone? Well, it goes back to understanding what they want and really want, because often they'll put blockages when they tell you what they think they want. Oh, I want to progress to this because I think it's what I'm capable of. And after that, I don't know because I don't know if I can. And it's like doing your best to support them, but stretch goals. And then when they do them, then they know they're capable. So it's a slow process.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to happen in like 4 months.
Yeah. I think definitely extending what they think is capable is very important, because we always say you can't be what you can't see.
Yeah.
And so then, especially because there's so many less women in tech industries, it's like, well, how are we meant to know? So it's really great to have people like kind of reality check and be like, that is actually possible. And yeah, I think because there's so many behavioral things about women not applying for jobs unless they meet all of the criteria versus like men applying for one that will meet like 60% of the criteria or something.
Not even.
Yeah, not even that.
And I think sometimes if I'm trying to weigh off a decision, if I'm smart about it, I try to think what would a man do, because then it's like, well, then if I have the general audacity that some men are born with, I would just apply anyway.
Yeah,
So-
my coach used to say the same, who said my resume was shit. Think like a white man who went to private school in Sydney area.
Yeah. I channel the fail up methodology. You know how there are some people, everyone knows at least one. If you don't, well. But they're these usually men, not to stereotype, but they're people that are not competent at their role, but they got a good role somehow. And then because they got that good role, they got a better role. And then they've just kept failing in an upward direction. And women, unfortunately, don't tend to do it. But I think, man, the amount of confidence they must have to be at that level of capability at that role is really inspiring. I feel like I can take a little bit of that confidence, because I used to say, oh, it's a good thing people underestimate me. Like I walk into a room, I have a bit of a baby face and I'm a woman and I talk with an energetic voice because that's how I overcome my social anxiety, and people assume that I know nothing. And I used to think, yeah, that's a good thing, because then I can blow them away with the fact that I'm actually pretty good at tech. But now I'm like, hey, wouldn't it be cool if I walked into a room and people respected me just based on the respect that they would give anyone else? Like I would like them to assume that I'm not an idiot or I don't know anything about tech. Like that would be awesome. I've flicked from, it's good people underestimate me to being like, wouldn't it be good if they saw enough people that looked like me, sounded like me, and had a similar disposition to me, they just thought, yeah, another person in tech, rather than, oh, operations manager probably loves Instagram. I don't know. I feel okay about Instagram. I wouldn't say I see them as more of a friend. So yeah, acknowledging like even like I was scared of people thinking that I was good, because then the only way is down. Whereas if you step into your own capability, you can go much higher than where you would have started.
But you see that just in recruitment. Like to get women to apply, you need to change the old job description to make it more appealing for women. So there's key things you can discuss in an application for women to apply, but also you have to cut all the super detail on the job, because then, as Arden said, if they don't meet all these criteria, they may not apply, while most of those skills might be taught on the job.
Yeah. But then it also it doesn't affect how many men apply to the role.
No.
And so then it's like, why is this even still a conversation? Like, shouldn't it?
It should be standard.
It should be standard.
Yeah.
We've actually seen, because we have at New Tech People, like gender diversity, getting more women into tech's been a really important thing for us. And we've included a statement at the bottom, as well as tweaking how we write job ads, that says, if you don't meet all of these criteria, that's okay. We'd still love to have a conversation. And some men have taken that as I have no experience in this area, but it looks kind of interesting, so I thought I'd apply. And it says you want to have a conversation with me. And it's like, oh, right idea, wrong audience.
See, we did that at MGA Thermal, and we had like a few women actually email and say, I wouldn't have applied if it wasn't for this.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was really good.
Just fire off some resumes.
Yeah.
Like, rejection is hard, but trust me, you just got to believe in yourself. No one's responsible for your own validated feelings and self-worth other than yourself, which is something my psychologist also told me yesterday.
But also it's daunting. Like, I remember I had to hire like the first female in non-traditional role. Like, we had female engineers, but we had none operator in trades when I was operation manager. And we actively went to talk to women that we thought were good for the role, told them to apply.
Yeah.
We reached to our network, like myself and the HR person, just to get people to apply, change the ad, but actively, and told the ed recruiter, like, anyone who's like gender different than male, send them to us. At least we look at the resume and we can decide from there. And we got two, and we got a trade, like an electrician, and they were already good, but it's getting them, and it's still daunting for them, because there's some statistic that say until there's 15-20%, you're still a minority, so it's still going to be harder for you. Yeah. So you have to consider that and make sure you keep supporting them too.
Yeah, like having to educate a bunch of men that may not have had a woman in the workplace before about what is deemed acceptable behavior is always a fun one.
But that's another form of like sponsorship, getting people in the workforce where they were nobody.
Yeah.
It was a full year of my life trying to change that. Like, you have to be really invested and passionate about it.
Yeah.
I didn't think of it as sponsorship, but I'm one of the organizers for the /New conference. And one of the really important things for us was making sure that we had a diverse lineup of speakers. And one of those verticals was gender diversity. And for so many amazing women that I knew talked well, they'd either been on the podcast or they presented at an event or I'd seen them somewhere, they were like, oh, I couldn't apply. No one wants to listen to me. I was like, absolutely incorrect. Give me a talk bio. You're submitting a call for paper. Like, you'll do such a great job and we'd love to have you on board. But we had to actively ask them. That was a conversation, because they had assumed that they wouldn't make the cut, which was just, it was really fascinating because they're all so talented. But it was really good to be able to have those conversations and get them on board.
But it's a form of sponsorship.
Yeah.
You boosted them to try.
Mm-hmm. So why is it essential for men to engage in sponsoring women in technology, and how can men be more effective allies?
I think it goes back to what we were saying before, that like the top position are still majority held by men. So if men don't participate, what is it, like the only woman who's there has to sponsor 10 people?
Mm-hmm.
And then she'll get kind of almost ridiculed, like, why are you sponsoring all these people? So you have to find that balance. Like, it's not going to work.
You mentioned to me earlier that someone said to you, that's not my job to do. And it's like, okay, so is it just the only woman in this team's job to do? Like,
yeah, I was navigating some conversations around, I don't want to use the word microaggressions, but basically unconscious bias and how it shows up. I work in the tech industry. As a result, there are a lot of men there. I lean into some of those difficult conversations because if those unconscious biases stay at an unconscious level, you'll never even really recognize that they're there and you can never do anything about it. So I have put myself out there when I have the emotional energy to have conversations with a bit of radical candor as well, to be like, here's how this has impacted me. Here's why I feel this way. In the future, here's what I'd like us to look at. Let's bring those subconscious biases up to a conscious level. You start doing that with one person, maybe they'll do it with another, and slowly it will spread, and everyone will see women as competent members of the workforce just inherently, which would be awesome. And I was having a conversation with another man, and he said, well, that's not my responsibility to help, because I had gone to him for help on this. And he thought, I don't have time for that. That's not really what I should be held accountable for. And I totally understand that people don't have the time or the space constantly to have these conversations. I'm passionate about it. And even I only have them very rarely because they are so emotionally draining. But it's a really fascinating look at, that's none of my business. And it's like, well, it should be everyone's business.
Yeah.
Teams with greater gender diversity are more profitable. They build tech that's more accessible for a wider range of people. There are so many tangible benefits to having diverse technology teams that it should be on everyone to do it at least a little bit where they can and they have the time, rather than saying, oh no, I'm a man, so I don't have to do anything with that. I'm just not being part of the problem. And it's like, okay.
They're part of the solution. Like they're literally part of the solution. And your question was like, how can they? I feel there's different ways, but like the ones that I've seen doing it really well, they have actually a genuine interest in people. You have to ask what people are working on, be interested in them as a person, get to know them. Then you kind of go above those barriers and biases by having a general interest, but also they have to believe in it. And one thing that I think upper management and executive can do, you have to hold manager accountable if they're doing nothing for diversity and it's in your book of values and roles. Yeah. I don't know my opinion on quotas, like everyone asking, I don't know. But I think holding your manager accountable, like I remember some company I worked, it was in the goal, the KPI for the year. And then you have roles open and it's men after men being hired. And these managers who are hiring those men have no consequences. It should have something. Someone should double check and say, look, you had 3 roles open. It was 3 and 3. And I saw there was female applicant.
Yeah.
Why they didn't get it? What happened?
Yeah. Like what ruled them out?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think having tangible, criteria, because I think sometimes even just like, I've had someone say, oh, they didn't seem like head of like material. And I'm like, seems like what was the actual qualifying thing here? Was it just because she was a woman?
We did a matrix, like the HR lady and I, and it really helped. Like we had all the skills you need technically, and then we had a little box in the matrix, diversity of thoughts, and then it was a weighted matrix. So we gave more points to that diversity of thoughts and more point to one of the key technical skills, and the other one we just rated them differently. And then at the end, it's and it really worked with operators. They actually initially resisted it, and the trades too. But then after that, they were like, oh, it's logical. Yeah. You just judge everyone on the same basis. Yeah. And yes, you give a bit more point. But if a guy is exceptional in all the other, he's still going to have more points in the end. Yeah. It's just that if a woman is really good and maybe lacking just a tiny bit that we can teach her, she can be the top scorer. And then... So, you have to go back to tangible criteria, things that it's not in the air.
Diversity is a skill. And so the less diversity you have, the more the team needs that skill because you don't have an alternate perspective. But great to have a wide variety of alternate perspectives because we need that to find all of the solutions to the different problems that come up.
Yeah, and so many men wants to champion, they just don't know how to start.
Yeah.
And a lot of companies could do something more there's a lot of tools you can give those men in leadership position.
Yeah.
Tools to understand. Like I know Boeing is like such a big global company, but we had a lot of tools on bias online for managers. So you can take the time and go look them. And I was doing one sometimes with my team. So then you make awareness within the team. So when these team members become hopefully they remember that we had that discussion.
Yeah. I have had that feedback similarly of, oh, I want to do something different, but I'm a man, so I'm part of the problem, so I can't do anything to help. It's like, oh, no, you're not inherently part of the problem. That's something that's important to take on, and that also it's about intent. Yes, you might stuff up and use the wrong language or ask a question that might come across as rude, but a lot of people understand what your intent is. And if your intent is to genuinely learn and improve and do better in every interaction, then they'll take that on board. It's about being genuine, similar to how your sponsor was genuine. We can tell that. And we've got a really good sense for whether you're actually engaged and want to learn for the right reasons, or if you're doing one of those things that some people like to do, which is playing devil's advocate just to get a rise out of someone. If you're doing that, therapy is expensive, but it's worthwhile.
Or you've been giving a KPI that you don't really care, but you know you have to hire. So then it's not going to be genuine. You'll have like someone who get put in a position they don't want to be in because of their gender. So that's not better either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of how to be an effective sponsor, just generally, what are some of the strategies that you've seen or you think would work that people can employ to amplify the visibility of women without their direct involvement? So say if you want to sponsor a woman, maybe she's not on your team, maybe she's not even in your company. Like, are there other things that we can do in order to create that sense of sponsorship from further away?
I've never did it in different companies. I've done mentoring, but not sponsorship in different companies. I think sponsorship has a lot to do with the network.
Yeah.
So unless you like volunteer with people in their company and then you can help there, it's a lot about the network and the trust you build in your network to be able to talk someone up. But easy strategy that I find really work is breaking the stories. As you said earlier, there's always a story about women and gossip about women. Like a woman got cranky once and people talk about it for 2 years. But the guy who got cranky, he was really like affirmative and he knew what he wanted. And then, so every time you hear a story like that and it's valid for, even if you're not a sponsor, just break them.
Yeah.
Stop those discussions. They're just not useful. They're not bringing anything. Talk about the person all the time.
Yeah.
All the time. That's what I did all the time. So then when it's time for performance rating, woohoo, they get the best score.
I've heard a lot of good things. Yeah.
You have all the things they achieved and help them build that achievement. We are really bad in general, everyone, not just women in general, as writing down our achievements. Do a little journal. I keep telling it to myself. I forgot half the time when I think about it. Put the key one. Because then when it's time to sell yourself, you're able to, but then also your sponsor is able to, because he has those little snippet of achievement they can talk about you that you did. Propose them for different roles. Every time there's a role, say, I think that person. So even if they don't get selected, people will keep that in mind. It really worked for the people I sponsored to do that. You just like randomly drop their name all the time.
It's like you're their PR manager.
You are. You definitely are.
I like the breaking stories.
It's a really important one because I find there's always stories. There's always going to be, and it could be, sometimes it's really silly. Like it will be like two people had an argument. Yeah. And then it exploded that because one of the person had a bigger network, everyone in the company heard about that story. And then that person is like demonized and they're super competent in their role, really good achiever. But then we cannot promote that person because she has a really tough personality. And does she, or was it a one-off?
I was talking to Arden earlier about how I've been described as aggressive recently. And I always think that's a really fascinating one. Because I'm quite self-critical. I'm like, am I aggressive? Or if I were a man, would you be using the words assertive? Because I try to take radical candor into difficult conversations. And that is often labeled almost solely by the men that I talk to as aggressive. And I tend to take the line of it was never an insult. It was a clear, like, just me drawing where my boundaries are and explaining my feelings. And at no point was it outward agitation or aggression. It was just here's where I'm standing. Here's where it's at for me. Do with this information what you will. But that is always described as aggressive, which is one of the just bugbears that I have at the moment. So next time someone says the A word to me, then they will see what aggressive is, just for contrast.
But I think if you put that in perspective, it's people dealing with their own emotion.
Yeah.
So you expressing how you feel about a situation, that makes them feel guilty. And instead of thinking about why it makes them feel guilty, did something they do, they prefer to label you than dealing with their own emotion. Because I feel in the society we're living, a lot of people are living with guilt.
Yeah.
At the moment, and they don't know how to deal with it. And people tend to try to understand too. You don't need to understand how I'm feeling. You just need to acknowledge what I'm saying. It's a big difference. But people want to understand. And if they don't, it makes them feel uncomfortable. So then they label you. I got labeled as rude and aggressive too. Don't worry.
Aggressive club.
We'll make you a little badge.
Yeah.
It'll be gold, like you won a trophy.
Or you know those harnesses that dogs wear that say warning anxiety?
Yeah.
Like, warning aggressive.
What are some common challenges sponsors face when advocating for women in technology, and how could they overcome them?
I think it goes back to what I was giving, like the rumor and biases and perception on someone is one of the biggest. And is she really capable? Do you really think she could do this role? And you're like, yeah, I'm pretty sure she can. And also like the old-fashioned, she's going to have a baby soon because she's 30. So we can't really put her in a role.
Wow.
There's no good age to be as a woman. You're either too young,
too old,
or baby age. And those are your only options.
And after that, you're too old. Like,
Yeah.
But they won't say it like that. But you know is that, oh, is it a good timing to promote? Like they're the biggest one, the bias. Because I don't feel promoting someone who's pregnant who's going to come back is an obstacle. The only obstacle is finding a good, suitable replacement for when that person is gone, which I understand is a hassle. It is. I had to deal with it. It's quite difficult because who wants to roll for 12 months?
Yeah.
Not many people. But yeah, the biases, the perception.
But if we were on the flip side, and I forgot what I was going to say.
Well, now the good thing, Arden, I don't know what you're about to say, but the good thing is that a lot of companies now are switching that they're calling it parental leave, and it applies to both parents.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping with that progressive approach that companies are taking, it will change the perception. Shared load of, well, I have to go because it's daycare pickup is not associated just with women.
Yeah. It makes a big difference.
As soon as we get to even amounts one day, maybe
it won't. It will help because then it should be a shared responsibility, and it's we carry the baby.
Yeah,
like you need the uterus
for now.
For now, yeah. Who knows?
If you were to flip it around in the benefit of like employing someone for a role, if they're about to have a baby, is that they're about to learn a whole heap of like new management skills and project. You know, like that. There's a lot of things that I imagine you learn because I haven't done it.
But actually, it makes me remember my sponsor used to say that all the time. Greg, he used to say that like I sponsor women. That was one of his things because. And he said, people think that women who have a family are less to be smart. He's like, they have way more skills. They can manage their time better because they used to be so stretched in time. They can do the stuff in the time they have.
Yeah,
and he was a really big advocate for women who are also mothers because they're really efficient. You have no choice.
Yeah. Competing deadlines. If I don't do this, someone will literally die. And
that's
that
it.
baby,
stakes.
I think one of the interesting things about sponsoring women in the context of the conference is that a lot of the feedback and the rhetoric that I heard was we have to make sure the women are actually good because we don't just want to put women on stage.
And good for the role. good candidate for the role.
Yeah.
You're like, what's the definition?
I think I've had that in discussion with quotas or like saying, oh, well, we need to hire a woman or something. And there seemed to be a bit of a preconception that if we said, well, we need to hire a woman for this role, that we'd just go out onto the street and be like, hey, do you want a job? You're a woman.
Yeah.
Get into the van.
Yeah.
Rather than actually hiring someone who has qualifications and experience.
And in the same token, like there are people that will assume because you're a woman, you're there to meet a number, not because you are fully capable and confident
And
in
like,
the role.
If you are a woman in tech, as we've already talked about, it's likely that you are very competent in your role.
Which I always think is funny. Even last year, some of them were like, "Oh, you know, we heard some negative feedback about the women," and I was like, "Is it the women? One, people are going to be overly critical of anything women in tech do. Two, we're going to put that piece of feedback in the bin." But it is really interesting to be seen as the diversity placement or the diversity hire, and you don't like. Sponsorship is so important, and also helping people understand that you're sponsoring them not just because they're a woman, but because they have those skills. That's where they want to go, and they have that capability. I think is really important as well.
Absolutely.
And they may be less confident because we talked before about the fear because they didn't get given those opportunities before. So you have to take that in perspective. But it made me think when you were talking about an example of like over criticize. I remember one of the plant I worked in early career. I was still like in my 20s, so a long time ago. And they hired female operators and they had a few, but that particular one, she was new. She was like really pretty, tiny. And the guys assumed because she's pretty tiny, she's going to be not a good operator because we have to manipulate tools and open valves. But I was supervising commissioning and one guy did a mistake, opened the relief valve, like product went out. No problem. They start again. She did it. Everyone is yelling at her on the radio and I lost it. I was in the control. I'm like, just shut up. Like the guy did it 10 minutes ago. Like, she needs to learn the hard way because she needs to be better. And then you're like, why? Why does she need to be better? She's starting like the other guy. The other guy was fine and it wasn't. So it's really interesting, like the perspective of that unwanted feedback. That's unwanted feedback. That's not constructive. That's just like yelling at someone who made a mistake. Everyone makes mistakes.
Yeah, and it doesn't like no one's ever been yelled at for a mistake and been like, well, this was the right way for me to learn not to do it again. I'm going to take that on board. Thank you.
Now I know.
Their brain goes, and then they immediately dump that information because they're so overwhelmed they can't take anything in. But it is, again, they probably weren't actively thinking, oh, she's a woman, she sucks. It was probably subconscious bias.
Probably, like definitely.
And it's always good to check yourself before you wreck yourself, everyone. So if you're listening to this, you know, we don't know that we have unconscious biases because they're unconscious. Everyone has them.
Everyone has them. Yep.
Yeah, I have them. Everyone in this room has them. It's part of being a human and having a brain that basically is a really complex machine learning model. But it's always good to inquire as to why we reacted in a certain way to some person or not another and what's informing that experience as a way to grow and just generally be better.
Yeah, doing a journal when you get cranky and noticing why.
Yeah.
Like I find like, especially at work, like you do kind of I use one of the coach had told me to do that and I was like, it's like so wishy-washy. And then you see it's a tendency. So it may be a bias or a person. Like there might be a person that you don't like and it's okay. But then you have to learn to deal with that person.
Yeah.
There's going to be a tendency, like something that gets you. So if everyone was doing introspection on things like that, it would help.
Absolutely.
I've had like in proportionate reactions to stuff and I like to look back and think, why did this hit me as hard as it did? What's informing that? How do I pull that apart and then do something constructive with the information? And that might be having a difficult conversation. That might be very lightly screaming into a paper bag.
Punching a pillow.
Yeah. And sometimes it's just, for some reason this person's gotten under my skin and there's no real thing informing it, but I have to like be kinder to them and be kinder to myself and hold space for them as well. And sometimes, you know, you're being in the wrong and that's fine. We've all done it. But it's good to be able to recognize when those situations are happening and then, you know, do something productive with it.
Cool. Well, I think we'll wrap up. Thanks for being here, Annie.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
We stayed on topic, more or less.
Yeah, I think it was all the prep and research.
Yeah. Thank God.
We'll link some of our favourite articles that we found through this research in the description box. You'll also find our website, codeddiversity.org, LinkedIn meetup group and Instagram in the description box. Please follow us on all of the platforms to stay up to date and support our community. And don't forget to leave a good review, recommend this podcast to your friends and share it online. And now Sarah's been saving up a random fact for us.
I like that it just says TBC on these notes. Yeah. My fact is that there are two kinds of whales, baleen whales and toothed whales. And toothed whales are dolphins. So remember like the smart ass kids at school, I was one of them, that said, killer whales aren't whales, they're dolphins. Well, plot twist, dolphins are whales. So technically still correct. And that's my fact. Good night, everybody. We stayed on topic, more or less.
Yeah, I think it was all the prep and research.
Yeah, thank God. If you're ADHD, find someone with autism.
Yeah,
that's the dream. That's the dream pair.
Is it the dream?